The American Civil War, in its tumultuous wake, left not just scars on the land and soul, but also a profound, intricate web of untold stories and deliberately buried secrets. The official histories, compiled in dusty archives and grand memoirs, meticulously chart the battles, the politics, and the emancipation. Yet, beneath this well-trodden ground of accepted fact, there exist quieter narratives, almost imperceptible vibrations of history that resonate only with the most patient observer. These are the stories that were never meant to be overtly told, but rather subtly preserved, like a faint, coded message in the brushstrokes of a forgotten painting. Our entry point into this particular historical silence is not a grand monument or a renowned battleground, but a humble object. Autumn fields with distant farmstead, an oil-on-canvas landscape. Its artistic merit, even in its prime, was modest. It hangs today, almost unnoticed, in the hushed, climate-controlled backrooms of the Connecticut Historical Society, categorized simply as period landscape, artist unknown, c. 1870. For over a century, Autumn Fields existed as merely that, a quaint, somewhat unremarkable piece of post-Civil War American art. It depicts a rolling, golden field stretching towards a distant, vaguely rendered farmstead under a muted autumnal sky. There are no dramatic figures, no heroic acts, no overt symbolism of the war that had just torn the nation asunder. It is a painting of quiet, unassuming peace, a visual sigh of relief after a prolonged national trauma. And it is precisely this seeming ordinariness, this pervasive atmosphere of gentle, almost forgettable calm, that makes it the perfect vessel for a profound and dangerous secret. The canvas itself is of good quality for its time, tightly woven linen stretched over a simple pine stretcher. The oil paints are earth tones, muted ochres, faded greens, dull browns, and a sky of soft, washed-out blues and grays. The brushwork is competent but lacks distinctive flair, a typical academic style that prioritized realism over emotional expression. The signature, if it ever existed, has long since vanished or was intentionally omitted. Even the provenance is dull. It was donated to the Society in 1932 by a descendant of a local Hartford merchant, accompanied by a note simply stating it had been in the family for generations. A perfectly ordinary, unremarkable, even boring historical artifact. And yet, it is within this very ordinariness that the contradiction lies. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a young art historian specializing in the social history of American landscape painting, stumbled upon Autumn Fields during a routine inventory project in the Society's storage. Her initial assessment mirrored all previous opinions. A competent, if uninspired, example of sentimental post-war art, probably painted by an amateur or a minor provincial artist seeking to evoke a sense of national healing and return to rural tranquility. It was the kind of art designed to soothe, not to provoke. However, a faint, almost imperceptible detail began to niggle at Dr. Vance's finely honed observational skills. It wasn't the brushwork or the color palette, those were entirely conventional. It was the framing. The painting was housed in a heavy, elaborate gilded frame of the era, carved with intricate floral motifs and cherubic figures, a style typically reserved for much more significant works. This frame, in itself, was an artistic contradiction to the painting it held. It was like putting a simple folk song into an ornate opera house. Dr. Vance, with her deep understanding of period aesthetics, found it jarring. The frame is entirely out of proportion to the canvas's artistic merit, she noted in her preliminary report, suggesting either a significant mismatch or perhaps a deliberate misdirection. This seemingly innocuous observation, this tiny ripple in the placid waters of accepted history, was the first quiet gleam of the deeper secret. Under her direction, the painting was removed from its frame for conservation and a more detailed examination. This simple act, performed for routine scholarly purposes, peeled back the first layer of deliberate concealment. The canvas itself was adhered to the wooden stretcher not with modern staples, but with tiny, meticulously hammered copper tacks, a common practice of the time. But Dr. Vance noticed something else. The canvas was stretched with an unusual, almost excessive tension. It was drum-tight, far more taut than necessary for a landscape of this size, making the entire surface feel oddly rigid. When the conservators began the slow, painstaking process of removing decades of accumulated grime and yellowed varnish, another anomaly emerged. The painting's underlying composition, visible through infrared reflectography, a technique used to reveal underdrawings beneath paint layers, showed a remarkable and unexpected precision. The initial sketch beneath the paint was not loose and impressionistic, as one would expect from a minor landscape artist. Instead, it was remarkably geometric, almost architectural in its exactitude. Lines that appeared organic in the final painting were in the underdrawings ruler straight. Fields that seemed gently undulating were, in the hidden sketch, composed of sharp, angled polygons. This was the first significant canvas of contradiction. The outwardly serene, organic landscape concealed an underlying, rigid, and intensely mathematical structure. Further investigation by Dr. Vance, now thoroughly intrigued, focused on the paint layers themselves. Using macrophotography and spectral analysis, she began to notice a pattern in the brushstrokes that was far too consistent to be accidental. In particular, the seemingly random application of small dark brown flecks in the foreground foliage, initially dismissed as textural details, formed a repeating, almost rhythmic sequence. These flecks were not consistently sized or spaced, but followed a peculiar uneven rhythm: short, long, short, short, long, short. This pattern was the quiet, unsettling realization. The painting was not just a painting. It was a cipher. The implications were profound. Who would embed a code in such a seemingly innocuous work of art? What message could be so crucial, so dangerous, that it needed to be hidden in plain sight behind a veneer of pastoral tranquility meant to be ignored? The mid-19th century was rife with secret societies, clandestine networks, and the lingering shadows of wartime intelligence. The painting, in its quiet existence, was a dormant historical artifact, waiting for the right observer to see beyond its surface. Dr. Vance, now fully immersed in the silent pull of the mystery, understood that the very boringness of the painting was its most effective camouflage. No one would look for a secret message in such an unremarkable piece. Its lack of artistic drama was its genius. The artist, whoever they were, had masterfully crafted an artifact designed to be overlooked by generations, waiting for a time when the technological tools and the patient scholarly eye could finally decode its silent message. The initial task was daunting. The Morse code, if it truly was Morse code, was not a simple string of letters. It was embedded within the texture of the paint, disguised as natural variations in the foliage. Extracting it required painstaking pixel-by-pixel analysis, a process that unfolded over many quiet, focused months in the hushed environment of the conservation lab. The autumn fields with distant farmstead was no longer a simple landscape. It was a historical riddle, a silent testament to a secret that refused to fade. Its contradiction, the peaceful surface masking a coded, urgent message, was the very essence of its enduring power. The stage was said to uncover the identity of the hidden cartographer and the secret map he had woven into the very fabric of an ordinary farmstead was a canvas of contradiction, a geometric secret veiled by pastoral sentimentality. Immediately recast the unknown artist from an amateur painter into a sophisticated shadow architect. The deliberate nature of the concealment demanded a mind trained in both camouflage and cryptography, a unique skill set common among the quiet, unsung intelligence operatives of the Civil War era. Dr. Eleanor Vance, transitioning her research from art history to historical forensics, undertook the painstaking process of identifying this architect. The breakthrough came not from finding a hidden signature on the canvas, but from examining the provenance of the expensive, mismatched gilded frame. Archival research into the frame's maker, a specialized carver in Philadelphia, revealed a ledger entry from 1869 detailing the commission. A custom frame requested by a client listed only as E. Thorne. The name Elias Thorne was common, but further cross-referencing against Union Army records for cartographers and intelligence agents led Dr. Vance to a brief, almost forgotten file. Elias Thorne served the Union forces not as a frontline soldier, but as a specialized topographical engineer attached to the quartermaster's department in the Western Theater. His true value, however, lay in his later assignment, mapping the complex, constantly shifting networks of civilian support and escape routes across the contested borders, a task that required silence, anonymity, and absolute trust. Thorne was a master of non-conventional reconnaissance, tasked with charting the invisible fabric of wartime assistance. Thorne's motivation for embedding a secret in a painting post-war became chillingly clear. During the war, he was charged with charting a critical stretch of the Underground Railroad that extended deep into the Confederacy, a network of enormous strategic and humanitarian value. After the war's end, with tensions lingering and reconstruction efforts often failing to protect former slaves, the knowledge of these specific escape routes and safe houses remained a profound liability. If this map fell into the hands of vengeful Confederate sympathizers or local vigilante groups, it could lead to catastrophic reprisals against the families who had offered shelter. The map had to be preserved, not in a military archive, where it risked classification and subsequent public release, but in a durable, permanent medium that was publicly accessible yet intellectually invisible. Thorne chose the canvas, transforming the act of painting into an act of archival protection. The seeming ordinariness of the landscape was the perfect cipher key, a painting designed to be viewed as harmless, soothing background noise. The decryption, the code in the brushstrokes. The actual decoding process required the same meticulous, deliberate patience that Thorne himself must have employed, making it a perfectly slow, meditative chapter in the unfolding narrative. Dr. Vance utilized high-resolution digital imaging and specialized software to map the anomalies identified during the spectral analysis. The first step was confirming the Morse code structure. The small, dark brown flecks of paint in the foreground foliage were isolated. By measuring the physical distance and size of the flecks, Dr. Vance assigned them numerical values. A fleck wider than the average background brushstroke was a dash. A fleck narrower was a dot. This initial extraction yielded not a coherent English message, but long, frustrating strings of numbers interspersed with random letters. 4.3.D, 18.9, L, 2.7, X, 5.11. This confirmed the sophistication of Thorne's camouflage. It was not a direct linguistic cipher, but a polyalphabetic coordinate system cleverly disguised as natural texture. The key to the system was found in the painting's most unconventional element, the color palette. While the overall color scheme was muted, spectral analysis revealed that Thorne had used 3 different, distinct shades of dark brown pigment, each separated by minute differences in mineral content, differences invisible to the naked eye but clear under UV light. Dr. Vance theorized that these 3 shades were the final layer of the cipher, acting as a triangulation key. Shade 1, iron oxide base, correlated to latitude. Shade 2, umber carbon base, correlated to longitude. Shade 3, sienna or clay base, correlated to key point identifier, KPID, distinguishing safe houses from simple geographical markers. The numerical strings extracted from the Morse-like pattern were not random. They were altitude measurements and sectional grid references for a geographical map laid across the canvas. The true work lay in the slow, relentless task of correlation. For weeks, Dr. Vance worked through the digital image, assigning coordinates based on the convergence of the 3 paint shades and the Morse rhythm. First, isolate all shade 1 flecks. Map their vertical placement, y-axis, onto the grid of the original underdrawing, Thorne's geometric sketch. Next, identify the corresponding shade 2 flex within a calculated proximity, establishing the x-axis. Finally, confirm the cluster with a shade 3 marker, tagging it as a critical waypoint, KPID. This process was intensely repetitive, relying on the quiet, methodical precision of the digital tools. It was a mirror image of Thorne's original careful brushstrokes, undoing his meticulous work in slow motion. The atmosphere in the conservation lab was one of deep concentration, the silent hum of the computers echoing the unvoiced urgency of 1870. The result of this painstaking work was the extraction of over 40 distinct, precise coordinate sets, a complete functional map laid bare. The code in the brushstrokes was broken. The ordinary landscape was indeed a hidden geographical document. The coordinates, when plotted onto a modern map of the American Northeast, did not point to battle sites or gold mines. They pointed to a complex, zigzagging line of remote, rural properties and obscure crossroads spanning from northern Virginia up through Pennsylvania and into Connecticut. This was the map Thorne had risked his life to preserve, the post-war continuation of a critical escape corridor for those still seeking freedom after official emancipation had failed to protect safety. The shadow architect had successfully woven a desperate plea for freedom into the visual language of peace and stability. He entrusted his most dangerous secret not to a bank vault or a sworn affidavit, but to the enduring, ignored silence of an ordinary work of art. The seeming banality of autumn fields with distant farmstead had protected the freedom of countless unnamed individuals for over a century. The mystery now shifts from who and how to why. Why did this vital message remain encoded? And what did the hidden map mean? The final act of decoding the autumn fields with distant farmstead was not a moment of exhilarating discovery, but of profound, heavy reflection. The numerical strings and color-coded coordinates, painstakingly extracted from the texture of the painting's foliage, mapped precisely onto a network of small, obscure properties and secluded rural roads in the mid-Atlantic states. The map confirmed the terrible hypothesis. This was not a blueprint for a battle strategy or a military cache, but a detailed charting of a post-Civil War continuation of the Underground Railroad. The silent cartographer, Elias Thorne, had not just recorded history. He had preserved a blueprint for survival necessitated by the failure of Reconstruction. The fact that this clandestine map was created and carefully encoded after the official end of slavery and the Declaration of Emancipation was a chilling historical indictment. The decoded horizon revealed a harsh truth. For many, the promise of the American horizon, the peace and prosperity hinted at in Thorne's pastoral landscape, was entirely conditional, dependent upon secret pathways and the immense, quiet bravery of those who provided shelter. The necessity of silence. The true significance of the cipher lies not in the existence of the routes, but in the enduring necessity of their secrecy, even decades after the war's conclusion. Thorne, the shadow architect, recognized that while the legal chains were broken, the social and violent chains persisted. The Ku Klux Klan and other vigilante groups were actively hunting those who sought true freedom and punishing those who helped them. Thorne's decision to bury the map in a painting and leave no key meant he trusted future generations with the methodology of decoding, but trusted no one with the information itself. The silence was an act of profound protective custody. It was the only way to safeguard the identities of the dozens of families, black and white, who continued to risk their lives to operate this crucial lifeline well into the 1870s and 80s, long after the rest of the nation had declared the conflict resolved. The painting, in its quiet contradiction, whispered, "The war of survival did not end with Appomattox." The confrontation with the present. Dr. Vance and her research team approached the physical locations on the map with the solemnity of archaeologists entering a sacred yet functional ruin. They did not announce their purpose. They engaged in quiet, respectful observation, using only contemporary survey techniques. The coordinates led them not to grand estates, to obscure farmsteads, old, weather-beaten homes still owned by the descendants of the original families, who knew nothing of their ancestors' silent bravery. Quiet ruins, the foundations of barns and outbuildings strategically located near old waterways or dense forests, perfect isolated cover points. The vanishing trail, patches of land where the old county road had been rerouted, leaving the original path, the path marked on Thorne's map, to dissolve back into the earth. There were no dramatic finds, no hidden tunnels, no large caches of artifacts. The secret was kept clean and simple. The evidence was the architecture of quiet hiding, the double-walled cellars, the suspiciously large haylofts, the placement of wells far from the main house. The physical silence of these locations reinforced the historical silence of the painting. The lives saved by this map were absorbed back into the general historical anonymity, their freedom earned by quiet, unwritten courage. The moral weight of the silence. The final central dilemma for Dr. Vance was the moral imperative inherited from Thorne. Should the map and the names of the families who operated the safe houses be released to the public? The historical imperative demands truth, but the ethical imperative demands protection. Even in the modern era, the public revelation of these families' heroic and highly illegal actions could carry a complicated legacy, potentially exposing descendants or commercializing a sacred, painful history. Dr. Vance and her colleagues ultimately decided that the enduring silence was the most honorable path. To reveal the names would be to undo Thorne's final protective act. The true message of the decoded map was not the coordinates themselves, but the philosophical statement it represented, that true moral courage often happens outside the view of the official historical record, and that some secrets must be held in perpetuity to honor the sacrifice they represent. The message in the brushstrokes was not meant for the newspapers. It was meant for the few, patient scholars who could appreciate the quiet genius of its concealment. The decoded horizon, therefore, reveals a horizon that is ethically bounded. Dr. Vance published her findings in a slow, meticulous academic monograph, revealing the existence of the cipher, the methodology of its extraction, and the purpose, a post-Civil War escape network, but deliberately omitted the specific coordinates of the safe houses. The exact locations remain protected, encoded in the paper trails of the specialized journal, a form of academic silence that mirrors Thorne's artistic concealment. The painting, Autumn Fields with Distant Farmstead, was carefully restored and returned to the quiet back rooms of the Connecticut Historical Society. It now hangs as the perfect artifact of enduring silence. To the thousands who pass by the archive, it remains a common, boring landscape, a visual testament to rural tranquility. But to the few who know its secret, the soft brown flecks of paint are no longer mere texture. They are the rhythmic dots and dashes of a desperate, vital communication. They are the message of enduring silence, confirming that the pursuit of freedom is often quiet, unending, and permanently hidden from the loud, self-congratulatory noise of official history. The story ends not with a noise, but with the peaceful, profound realization that the most important historical truths are sometimes the ones that must remain unread by the general public, protected by the silence of art.